have an amendment before the desk, at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment. Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 734 offered by Mr. Takano of California, identifier H734ANS-AM_010.
Chairwoman, I reserve a point of order.
The point of order has been reserved. The gentleman from California, Mr. Takano, is recognized for 5 minutes in support of the amendment.
Madam Chair, my amendment would ensure that the gains that female athletes have seen over the last 50 years of Title IX are not lost if an administration hostile to girls and women's sports comes into power. Under this amendment, long-standing regulations on gender parity in high school and college athletics would become law. Under the regulations, although the regulations carry the force of law now, an administration that wanted to turn back the clock back to a time before the proliferation of girls and women's sports could easily do it by rescinding the text. And make no mistake, the regulations in 34 CFR 106.41 contain the central protection of women's and girls' sports in this country. I'm sure my colleagues across the aisle would share my concern that too often schools provide inadequate and unequal support toward the success of women's sports. Disparities in resources for men's and women's sport continue to create playing fields that are literally unequal. Many girls' teams play on poorly maintained grass fields while boys play on expertly curated turf. Playing fields allocated to girls' sport often lack proper fencing and lighting and may have holes or drainage problems, all contributing to less safe playing conditions. Equipment for girls' sports is replaced less often than boys' equipment, and too frequently, girls' teams are given old equipment from boys' teams once the boys have received new. Girls' uniforms are often made of less advanced materials, more cheaply produced, and expected to last for longer periods than boys' sport uniforms. School districts continue to offer boys' teams without the equivalent for girls, even when they are skilled players for and substantial interest in a girls' team. These are the Title IX violations that threaten girls and women's sports on a day in and day out basis. These are the conditions that are the basis of so many resolution agreements between the Department of Education and schools. 50 years after Title IX, these regulations have helped to make progress, help us make progress to equality in sports, but we have a long way to go. By codifying these regulations, we would signal to the world that you can't turn back the clock on women's sports. By cementing these protections in Title IX, we can build upon them to ensure that the next generation of female athletes have it better than those now. And we get closer to that point where all athletes are competing literally on even playing fields. And again, the threat to women's sports is not the handful of trans youth seeking to participate. It is the unequal conditions that persist today that renders us falling short of the full meaning of what Title IX could mean for the girls and women of our country. I urge my colleagues to accept this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.